Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Podcana episode 38. We are here with two new Into the Inkland spoilers. Very excited to get them. You know, I was wondering if we were going to get one for this new set, and we didn't get one. We actually got two, one Amethyst and one Amber. They're pretty exciting. But first, how are you guys doing? How has your weeks in Lorcana been? I know you went to a tournament again, Kawa.
I did.
The tournament grinder over here.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest European Lorcana events took place in Vienna in Austria last weekend. I came first in the Swiss portion. I'm going to keep milking that, by the way, because I played absolutely terribly in my top 16. But, I'm going to take off first in Swiss. Everyone else, in the top definitely didn't just ID and I actually won my game. That's definitely not what happened. But, yeah, it was an absolute blast. The venue was really, really cool. The organizers were awesome. The whole vibe really made me feel like this is exactly what I wanted official OP stuff to look like. Loads of judges around, just very well structured and formatted in general. And at the end of the day, if you play well, it feels good. So I traveled quite the distance. It would have been a bit upsetting if I didn't perform too well, but got to meet loads of new people. Again, shout out to anyone that did come up and say hi, that recognized me from the podcast. Again, that's going to be weird to keep getting used to. But yeah, in terms of the meta, did I find anything really exciting? Any new crazy decks? No, not really, unfortunately. There was a lot of what I expected, a lot of Ruby Amethyst control, a lot of, Sapphire Steel, Flute, all the decks we've been talking about for the past month were there. Your Emerald Steel discard, your Steel Amethyst, other aggro decks like the deck I brought myself. But overall, it was just great because more practice leading into the official announcements for format and pricing that we're going to get in March is just good. So right now I'm feeling really confident, but I'm also very, very, very ready for set 3, which is going to be exciting because we've got these two new cards to talk about. Moyen, how's your experience been? Have you broken the meta within the past week or so?
For me, nothing much has changed last week. I'm looking forward to getting into these tournaments as well, but for me, I'll probably wait until the official tournaments.
Yeah, well, speaking of tournaments, I will make sure Moyen goes to this one, guys. If you're interested and you live within Europe, or even if you're from the States and you want to come over, the biggest European Lorcana tournament was announced at the previous event. It's going to take place in Poland on April 6th and April 7th. It's 10,000 euros. However, just to note, I have to say this, it's not cash. It's going to be a 10k just in product. Like the rest of these events have been, I actually haven't seen a Lorcana tournament where it has been cash prizing so far. Obviously, we want that to change when the official announcement comes out from Ravensburger. But again, if you guys want to practice, if you guys just want to have a good time, there's going to be a lot of great people there. Recommend you guys going if you can make it.
Where is it in Poland?
It's in Poznan, which is kind of a bit rough for me because there's 2 flights a week from Dublin that go to Poznan, so I might have a bit of a journey on my hands. But I will make it for sure. I'll definitely make it.
But that might be doable by train for me.
If you're in Poland, and you end up anywhere near Krakow, you should go to the salt mines. It's you're like, salt mines. That sounds whatever. It's ridiculous. It's honestly the most alien thing I've ever seen in my life. I had the same. I remember I was with my family. We were in Poland, and something pops up on the itinerary. I guess hey, we're going to these salt mines. Whatever. Okay. You descend this elevator deep into the earth, hundreds and hundreds of feet. You get down there. And you're like, okay, it's going to be some kind of cave. What am I going to see? It's like a freaking cathedral down there. There's rivers, and it's unbelievable. The craziest thing, still to this day, I say it all the time. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen with my human eyes in my existence. It was just, I could not fathom what I was experiencing. So yeah, check that out if it's
so what you're telling me to do is fly to Krakow and then get a train over to Poznan just to check out the salt mines. Yeah.
Honestly, it's worth it. It's unreal. Kawa, what deck did you play at the tournament?
I played Aggro Ruby Amethyst, which is the same deck that I played at the previous tournament I went to in Manchester with Raven. I made some very slight adjustments. I think overall the adjustments I made were good. I took out a few rabbits because I felt like that card is a little bit slow in aggro. It's a very good card once you can kind of get the bouncing stuff going to get a lot of card draw. But I just subbed in some Cuscos, which I didn't really end up even playing that much. They were just an alternative card to Ink. I took out the majority of the like Fan the Flames that I was playing, took out all of the You Can Flies. I put in 2 Befuddles, so I was only playing like 2 Fan the Flames, 2 Befuddles, and again, if they were in my opening hand, I'd just always keep them for Ink, because I'd rather ink them instantly than mulligan them away and then draw them instead of an actually playable card. But overall, my matchups were pretty good. The only matchup I lost again was at the very start against another aggro player. I lost a high roll. That's literally the only reason I lost the game, because my deck just cannot interact with my opponent's cards before they quest. Like, I don't run any Teeth and Ambitions. The one thing, again, I don't want to talk about the deck too much. If anyone is interested in the deck, make sure to go over to my channel, because I did a full deck breakdown on it. The biggest mistakes that players made against my deck is a lot of the Ruby Amethyst control players, or even any of the Steel players, if they had the removal card, like Teeth and Ambitions, right? And let's say I had Arthur on the board, LeFou on the board, and like Maleficent or Pinocchio. They just always went for the highest questing card, so they'd always just kill off my Pinocchio, or they'd always kill off my Maleficent. That's literally how they lost the game 99% of the time, because if they don't kill the LeFou, then I just keep doing my infinite LeFou combo with Arthur, and I just win the game. Like, I think they prioritize the wrong card, because yes, on paper, that looks like the more threatening card, but once LeFou is still there, 3 or 4 turns of that infinite loop, it's just gonna be game, honestly. Yeah. So yeah, that was the biggest mistake.
Funny anecdote from the weekend. It was best of 3, but they had the players reveal their ink colors before the match started.
Oh, bro, I have a great story. So we had to do that at this tournament, which I do agree with. It was pretty good. So everyone was sitting down. Oh, what colors are you playing? You know, as soon as anyone said Steel, a little bit of my heart started beating faster, because that's the answer I don't want to hear. But the advantage for me was everyone thought I was on the Ruby Amethyst control. So I had like Emerald Steel discard players who ran like Fire the Cannons and Robin Hoods mulligan these cards away because they thought I was the control version, but I was the aggro player. So I was like, surprise, bitch. And it was so good. I got like at the end of some of the games after I like 2-0'd, the players actually turned around and said that to me. They were like, as soon as I heard Ruby Amethyst, I got rid of all of my removal. And I'm like, that's a really niche situation where I feel like being able to play a deck that is really popular for a certain ink color, but not playing the version that everyone thinks it is a huge. It was a huge advantage in this tournament. But I rarely think it's going to happen again going forward, unless it's a very specific meta. So it was really cool to debate people, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine how that would be advantageous for you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you? Again, we're going to talk too much about the list, but why do you keep opting to play Ruby Amethyst aggro rather than Ruby Amethyst control? Do you think it's more powerful? Do you think your matchup spread is better, or do you just like playing the deck more?
I don't think my matchup spread is better by any means. It was better than I thought. I think my worst matchup is Amber Steel Flute Song, because they run some of the cheaper removal cards, and with 1-drop Cinderella, they can just sing all of these things for free. But against Emerald Steel discard, and even against Sapphire Steel, the deck can still get there fast enough that I'm not really worried about all of their removal. Like, if they have like 2 or 3 smashes in a row and 2 Grab Your Swords and a Tinkerbell, then yeah, it's going to be hard to get there. But the deck still had a lot of fuel, even if your board gets removed once, maybe twice. But overall, I think the control Ruby Amethyst deck has more matchup spread. The only reason why I kept opting to play the deck in the past 2 tournaments was because I knew that 70-80% of the room was going to be Ruby Amethyst. And if that's the case, I think bringing that deck was the right decision. And in this case, it was. Like, if it was ever going to be a steel-focused meta, I would never in a million years dream of bringing any aggro deck. Not just that Ruby Amethyst aggro deck, but any aggro deck. So, yeah, I said it in my video breakdown. I still think that Ruby Amethyst control is the best deck in the meta because of how good the matchup spread is, and that's the reason why I brought the deck. Simple as. I wouldn't bring it for any other reason.
Well, so again, we've tried for multiple weeks. The community has tried, and the only way that we found to have a good matchup spread and also beat Ruby Amethyst was again Ruby Amethyst.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
The story is repeating itself.
So I will challenge that, because there was a large tournament that also happened this weekend online. Thea hosted a tournament, and I may or may not have slept through the check-in time. So
nice.
Did not compete, but did sign up. I want to talk about the first place deck list. Is from Schuler Dunce. It is a Sapphire Steel deck. won the entire thing. The top 16 was like 11 Ruby Amethyst as well, so it was definitely in a hostile field. There's some interesting deck choice or deck decisions that were made, or deck build decisions that I want to talk about. I listened to Schuler's interview for a bit, post-win interview. And by the way, any list we talk about, it's in the description, so that's where you're going to find it. Particularly, he did cut out some of the top-end stuff like Tamatoa and got in Develop Your Brain as well to be a bit more consistent. Then outside of that, it's pretty standard, but it's a bit more low to the ground, I think. And then also the Gaston intellectual powerhouses, I think, were the additions. Other than that, it's kind of a stock standard list. I do still think that Sapphire Steel is pretty powerful into Ruby Amethyst. I don't think it's like a super favorite matchup by any means. Also, if people are responding to there being a lot of, like, there is a deck that exists in the game that if there is a lot of Sapphire Steel showing up to a tournament that you could bring and just absolutely dunk on all those decks, which is Ruby Sapphire, the ramp deck. Yeah, it's a really, really bad matchup. What are y'all's thoughts? I mean, this is like 2 back-to-back big online tournaments that had very, very strong Sapphire Steel showings. I know we've seen Sapphire Steel perform well on the ladder. Do you guys think that this deck rivals Ruby Amethyst in power level?
I think it can get there against it. I think it's the one matchup where actually, does this player even play the peak card? No, they don't even play the Nothing to Hide. I was going to say Nothing to Hide is like in this matchup is the only reason why I might play it, because again, you can see if your opponent has to be prepared or not. You should make the assumption. We discussed this a lot last week, but I think it's the deck that can rival Ruby Amethyst the most, but the matchup is still very difficult, I think. Yeah, I don't know. I've seen a lot of people hop on this deck, and overall, I think it's fine. But it's more than fine, right? Because we can see that it's topped multiple tournaments at this stage. So if you're looking purely at the data, you can probably say that Ruby Amethyst is still at the top, and this deck is very close behind in terms of, not in terms of how often it's seen, maybe, but in terms of how well it performs. What are your thoughts, Moyen?
Yeah, I think it's really close. I don't see. The only thing is I don't see the matchup being good for Sapphire Steel if the Ruby Amethyst deck is built for that matchup. So I think a lot of Ruby Amethyst lists Sapphire Steel will do very, very well against. But as soon as they play, let's say, a few spellbooks, they have Teeth and Ambitions and Evasive, so they can kill the Evasive hate and then pressure with Evasives and books. Then I think Ruby Amethyst still has the edge in that matchup, but I think against a lot of Ruby Amethyst decks that don't have access to these tools, Sapphire Steel is actually really good, and in general, it is a very powerful deck. It's just it's not sitting on the throne.
Yeah, interesting. There's actually no Benja on this list, which I just realized. Which the lists I've been playing have had that card. For me, this is my honestly, this is my favorite deck of Chapter 2. The Ruby Amethyst list nowadays feels like such a tempo deck rather than a control deck for me, especially in the mirror. And it feels like there's kind of a bit of variance in the mirror for, what kind of cards you draw and what order you draw them, especially for the early game, because if you get too far ahead, it feels very, very hard to come back. It's not like the Ruby Amethyst mirrors of old. And let's be real, if you're playing Ruby Amethyst, you're going to play a lot of mirrors. That's just how the game works right now. So right now, this is probably my favorite deck to play. And I do think it's really strong. I think if Ruby Amethyst is going to beat you, I think their best primary game plan against you is actually, usually, I haven't thought about it as being book-based. Like, the books are impactful, but I'm more thinking about them landing a lot of early evasives, like Mickey Mouse into Mickey Mouse, and just getting ahead early is just, they can just kind of grind you out. And if you don't have that very, very timely removal, it can be rough. I think it can be really rough. Because
do you think this deck has a better matchup spread than Ruby Amethyst, though?
No. No. I don't.
Also, another question is, okay, I think Ruby Amethyst, if you play books, Teeth and Ambitions, and Evasives, I think it's pretty good into Sapphire Steel. But I guess asking Kawa, would you say the Arthur LeFou aggro versions of Ruby Amethyst fare better or worse into Sapphire Steel?
Better.
Really?
Better?
Yeah, I think so. Well, like this Ruby Amethyst version, I have to agree with Brendan again. I do think it's more of a tempo deck. I want to start calling this version of Ruby Amethyst more of a tempo deck than a control deck myself. But I've seen some of these decks just include the LeFou Arthur package and not the other aggressive cards like Maleficent, Pinocchio, because if you can even establish a bit of that loop, you can get a lot of lore and put on a lot of pressure. because the only answer to the Arthur is if they have the smash, and most of these decks are only running like 2 to 3. The other answer, of course, is if they have the Tinkerbell and then they grab your sword. But for the most part, it's definitely a worthy inclusion because it's still difficult for them to deal with. Like this is the deck that I practiced the most against leading up to the Vienna tournament, playing even the aggro deck. And like I said, I still found like even if they got like used a bit of their removal, it's close, but how fast Ruby Amethyst can go. Like the interesting thing about the Tempo Ruby Amethyst list now is how fast it can go even without having all of those aggro pieces, right? If you just do like 2 evasive Minnie Mouse, it's very hard for the opponent to beat that realistically, right? Like I've had that start against Sapphire Steel and it's like, well, like unless they have that Cruella or that Jafar down on turn 2, but again, if you have the Teeth and Ambitions, then that card's just gone. So like, yeah, overall, I think it's still very hard for them to deal with the matchup. If they're against a good Ruby Amethyst player, then the Ruby Amethyst player I think still has a bit of an advantage, right? But it's just about how much you practice against the deck.
I also want to say like how much nuance there is just between these two color combinations, even in just deck building. It's do you want to build the Sapphire Steel deck wants to beat the slow Ruby Amethyst? Okay.
Yes.
Well, in deck building, you need to include Benjas, so you're prepared for the books. You need to play nothing to hide, so maybe you can play around the be prepared set a little better. But then on the other side, against the Ruby Amethyst aggro versions, you're much better the more copies of Smash you play. And the Ruby Amethyst version is also okay. I guess you could go the route of I just Teeth and Ambitions your evasive hate and I pressure with evasive some books, but you can also go the route of okay, maybe you just want to be pressuring them with Arthurs and rely on them not playing the highest amount of copies of Smash.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot of
they...
interesting dynamics between those decks.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Alphos a lot about it because this is the deck that he brought to the event and he had a lot of practice on Sapphire Steel. If your opponent is smashing either your Minnie Mouse or your Arthur on turn 3 as a Sapphire Steel player, that's actually not really what they want to be doing. Like, sure, it gets rid of the card, but they'd much rather be doing their Fishbone Quill and getting that extra ink. So, like, if you're using a card, especially if they only run 2 to 3 smash, right? If you play an Arthur or play a Minnie Mouse and they smash it, like, it kind of feels bad, but it's honestly not the worst because that's just one of their removal tools. Like, one of their really good removal tools used up because besides that smash, they have no other way to easily deal the 3 damage without using 2 other cards combined.
Yeah.
So,
Tinkerbell must grab your swords.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting. You took the words right out of my mouth, Moyen, but it extends past deck building and also extends to Mulligan. Like, let's not even consider that, people like Kawa are playing a very different version of Ruby Amethyst that is aggressive. But even against the standard Ruby Amethyst list, you're faced with 2 vastly different game plans that you have to respond to. Do you need to be prepared to go late? Do you need to be setting up your Inkbound, like do your unfair thing, which is the Inkbound Quill, dump your whole hand, whole new world early and get massive card advantage? Or do you need to be prepared for a super aggressive start, which is like double Minnie Mouse? And they're vastly different. And ding, 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 you lose to both. So it's like you have to be perfectly prepared for whichever one is going to be implemented against you, and you seem to be the deck that is responding. That's what's so hard. Is I feel like when I lose to Ruby Amethyst with this list, it's because they get an aggressive start on me that I can't really stop. But at the same time, it's
so flexible, right? We talk about this so much. The Ruby Amethyst list is so flexible. There's so many different types of cards you can include. If players want to play the slower version, they can. If they want to play, I do agree that I think having some pace in the deck is good. I wouldn't say that you should auto-include the Arthur LeFou package into the list. Honestly, I think if you like that style of play, it's very good, but there are other cards you can play as well. It's just crazy to me that even if you don't put in that little bit more of aggression, you still have just like a crazy start, which could be your turn 1, and then turn 2 Snake, and then turn 3 Minnie, and then turn 2 another Minnie. Like, without trying to be overly aggressive, the deck can still be quite aggressive, which is really, really powerful, honestly.
Yeah. You ever seen that meme where it's like the astronauts and the one's got like the gun to his back of the head and it's like always has been? Like that's how I feel about Ruby Amethyst and the dynamic aggressive game plan that it can pivot and go super. Because like that's how the deck has always been. Just nobody acknowledged it in set 1. It's just ridiculous. Like that's why evasives are so. The whole entire meta is warped around evasives, whether you like to admit it or not. Actually, the entire game since its inception has been warped around these evasive characters, these cheap threats that can quest for 2, and just present this thing on board that you need answers to. You literally need answers to it, or it races way too fast. We're gonna try to talk about a few spoilers today. and of course ours as well. But I did see that they printed. I don't even think we'd get to this. They did print a 3-cost inkable 3/2 evasive quest for 1, kind of like a better Jetsam. That would definitely help deal with some of these Minnie Mouses.
We already have that, right? I mean, that's just fidget, no?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that's just fidget.
Yeah, so just another fidget, just like this critical mass of these characters that can deal with evasive. So I wonder if the Ruby Amethyst list will not be so, like the Minnie Mouse evasive game plan will ever be not so critical to its matchup, or if evasives are just too powerful in this game.
No, it depends, because as long as all the evasive hate characters still die to Thief and Ambitions, then you just
agree.
Evasive plus Thief and have fun countering that.
I think when it changes is when we get counter evasive cards that have the 3 health, because the 3 health spot is vastly different than the 2 health spot. It's why we've seen in the mirror matches how good like Pascal Crab or even Minnie Mouse Crab can be. If you have a 1/3 and suddenly it becomes a 3/3, you hit into Minnie, but then your Minnie is now vulnerable to Teeth and Ambition and stuff like that. But I do think overall, if we ever get a decently statted and decently costed anti-evasive card that has the 3 health, then like if you put a card like that into the meta right now, it would really disrupt the Ruby Amethyst player more than these like 3/2 cards.
Mm-hmm. All right, once again, all the deck lists in the description below. With that, let's head into our Spilled Ink section, our listener question section. If you want to get your question read out in next week's podcast, shoot us a comment on YouTube. We did have to skip last week because we had Savige on, so we've got 2 weeks to catch up on, but we've got some good content here. Kawa, I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, let me pull it up. All right, let's go. So starting off with Purple Shadow. I'd like to see an official youth division similar to Pokemon and Magic had early on. Builds a foundation of loyalty that I believe MTG and Pokemon are still reaping. We're expanding our Pokemon youth team to include Lorcana and hope OP supports divisions. Youth division. Explain this to me, Brendan. That's a term I'm unfamiliar with.
It hasn't existed in any game that I played. So, like you said, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, those are not card games that I have a lot of experience with. But I'm assuming it's it's a youth division, so there's surely an age cap in which, or an age ceiling in which you can no longer compete. I could see it working for Lorcana, because Lorcana is centered, like their target audience is to an extent definitely younger people. In card games, I don't know, card games I feel like the card game genre is not really marketed towards younger people. It does seem to be a bit of a older person's game, and not that much older. I mean, there's 17, 18-year-old prodigies. We don't really see someone usually around like that 10, 12, 13 year old range that's going and crushing like world championships. If they do, they're an extreme outlier. So I can see it as a good thing to cultivate a sort of younger generation of players and give them a place to compete in that's a bit more fair than the open tournaments, because yeah, I mean, card games do seem to be dominated by people that are in their sort of later 20s to early 30s, I would say, at this range. It doesn't account for everybody that's doing well in the game, but it does seem to be the sort of example, like the standard.
Mm-hmm. For sure. All right, next we have Gordon Kane. In the vocabulary of most gamers, simple. I don't get to mess with your ability to play the game on your turn. Yeah, this is something I think we discussed last week, or if we didn't, I was at least discussing with one of the guys, the guy that actually owns my LGS. And he was saying, yeah, a lot of people I've talked to, the reason why they don't want to get into Lorcana is because like there's no instance, they can't do anything on your opponent's turn. And he's like, that's the whole point of the game, is why Lorcana is so good, in my opinion. And I have to agree.
Simplicity.
We do, yeah. I think we
did.
We discussed this last week. Next question from Wonk Daddy. My question this week is tied to this prior thread. Do you think a card like Thoughtseize?
I can explain what that is.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so Thoughtseize is a magic card. It's basically one cost, one resource to look at your opponent's hand and take like a non-land card. I don't know if that's the exact wording, but basically. So it'd be kind of like Peak, but it wouldn't draw a card, and you would take... Well, there's no non-resource card. Yeah, character card would probably be limited. It'd probably just be like take a card in Lorcana, to be honest.
But add a card from their hand to your hand, or discard a card?
No, discard.
Oh. Yeah. I don't know. That. Yeah. Says, what design would even make sense to make it balanced? I think for it to remain a cheap cost, it would need to be uninkable on either a 1 or 2 drop card. It would allow you to see your opponent's hand and select any one card to be discarded, and then your opponent would gain 2 lore. Whoa. Okay, I did not see that part. I would not make it emerald in color just due to the inherent synergies, and I think it would be too good to have access without needing to limit the other options for emerald to use such a card like this. Personally, I think it is a neat Sapphire card. I mean, the most comparable thing we have to that at the moment is probably, I can't even think of the card. Sudden Chill, isn't it? It's like that's the 2-cost inkable song that you sing it and then it discards a card from your opponent's hand.
Yep. You want a hot take? 1 cost uninkable, it would be balanced. I think I think a lot of people would see that and they'd be like, because even in this question here, like, oh, we should give the opponent 2 lore, maybe make it cost 2. But I think 1 cost uninkable, which might sound surprising. Your opponent discards
a card. That's it. Yeah, your opponent discards.
You see, and then you pick the discard. I think that would actually be balanced.
Oh, yeah, you choose the card.
But I think at the current state of the game, it would be balanced. But I think that's mostly because decks don't rely on big synergies, or they don't rely on key cards to do specific things together. It's just like this giant tempo resource battle where just discarding 1 card, even if you get to choose it, isn't that crazy. So I think it being unlinkable would probably be balanced enough. But if you get to a stage like in most other card games, I think just 1 resource, choose a discard from your opponent to discard, would have a much bigger impact than it has in Lorcana right now.
I wouldn't say necessary. I kind of agree with that, but an advantage would be if, like, get rid of the key card that they have to ink, or get rid of the key card that they want to play. But it would depend on what deck you're facing. I think I do agree that overall it doesn't matter as much, but if we're in a meta that there are more combo based decks, or like more decks that really synergize, like you need all these cards to work together, then it would be good. But yeah, overall I do agree that it probably wouldn't be crazily impactful. But I like the balancing idea, Brandon. 1 cost, uninkable. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
We'd be testing the line a bit with that design, for sure. But I do think that the value exchange there is, I mean, it's fundamentally very underrated.
Yeah, but it's just like if you get to discard like be prepared, that's insane.
Yeah.
Maybe against the Sapphire deck you get to discard like they jammed all the cards on items because they were like, oh, I have Flaversham or Crab to get back into to have more resources.
Their whole new world, and then their hand is like they literally can't refill.
There's some instances where it can be
for sure. Good. Sometimes it would be really, really powerful, but I do think that when deck building, it wouldn't be an auto include. Which I do think a lot of people that would hear that card and hear that card design, that template, would think that this would be the most broken card ever printed in Lorcana. I actually don't think it would be.
All right, next comment is from KB2187. With set 2 meta almost done, what decks would you all deem as tier 1, 2, 3, etc.? Is it too much to call Ruby Amethyst tier 0 in set 2? I don't think I'd call it tier 0. I would put it at the top, but I wouldn't put it at like the top. I'd put it at tier 1. I'd probably put Sapphire Steel at tier 1 as well. I'll leave it at that and allow you guys to
put Steel Amber. Put Steel Ember's up there. I mean, that's another top tier guy.
Flutes. No, Steel Amber is not in the same tier as Ruby Amethyst.
Yeah, I do actually think Ruby Amethyst is tier 0. I don't think the Ruby Amethyst like absolutely destroys everything, but you really can't argue with some of the data that we've gotten from these tournaments. Like 7 out of 8 top 8, 11 out of 16. Like it is, regardless if it wins every single tournament, the deck is obviously ultra consistent. Like it's almost unprecedented seeing what percentage of top 8s it usually takes up. I'm not surprised when like at Thea's last tournament, when we do see something that's not Ruby Amethyst win. It's not like it's not crazy to me, but it does have ridiculous top 8 numbers. Like the deck is very, very, very good, and nothing else even comes close to the top 8 representation and conversion that Ruby Amethyst does. So I would put it in tier 0, and I agree with you on tier 1, except I'd probably put Amber Steel in there as well.
That's fair. Yeah.
Moyen?
For me, Ruby Amethyst would be best deck. I don't know if it doesn't matter if it has its own tier or not, really. Because it doesn't need to have its own tier because there is decks that beat it, but in trying to beat it, all your deck often gets worse against the rest, and because Sapphire Steel can't really do it on its own. But okay, Sapphire Steel is then second best deck, and I think everything else is quite a bit below that. So I think all the other decks are kind of mid.
Nah, Amber Steel is up there. I think those.
No, it's not. I don't think it's close to those 2 decks. I think like after that, Amber Steel, Amethyst Steel, the discard deck, the Mufasa decks, they're all kind of mid.
Sure. I would filter through like what decks would I play at a tournament, and I probably would never play Amber Steel in this metagame.
Yeah, me neither. But because when I was playing in these tournaments, a lot of people wanted me to be on Flute Amber Steel, or were surprised I wasn't. But in all these discussions, I was always just saying that the best versions of Ember Steel will have flutes. But that doesn't mean that Ember Steel is good enough in comparison to the actual best decks in the game. Unfortunately, I did try and test and hoped it was.
I think an Amber Steel flute deck actually came second at the event I was at. It came second, and there was a lot of Ruby Amethysts there. So the deck can beat Ruby Amethyst. But again, this is the whole point of what we're saying, is that decks can beat Ruby Amethyst, but if you wanted to rate decks in terms of just consistency, then I would put Ruby Amethyst in its own tier. Because in terms of consistency and representation across the board, it has performed the best. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like Ruby Amethyst is overpowered. I know I say it to be hyperbolic sometimes, but if I didn't play Lorcana and I just looked at top 8 data, it looks pretty OP. Like it looks overpowered. It's got a ridiculous conversion rate.
All right, next comments from Christian Young. I've heard your opinion of aggro decks being terrible feeling in Lorcana a few times, and I'm curious to hear what you think an interesting and healthy aggro deck in a game like Lorcana could look like. I guess, I mean, this is probably more tailored towards you, Brendan, but in my opinion, I'll say that, like, I don't know. I said this to Brendan before the pod. I didn't necessarily really enjoy playing an aggro deck, especially 2 tournaments in a row. I think it was a fair call to make, and it worked pretty well, but I do want to have a few more decisions to make. Yes, I did have some important decisions that I came into the more important games, but it's an interesting question to say what an interesting and healthy aggro deck would look like, because at the end of the day, an aggro deck is kind of just doing what an aggro deck does.
I was going to ask. Well, that's the key question: is what is an aggro deck? Like, how do you define an aggro deck? If you define an aggro deck by a deck that doesn't care what the opposing player is doing, and all they do is turn the thing sideways, basically indiscriminate of what goes on the board, then I think an aggro deck shouldn't exist. I think that those decks suck. But if an aggro deck is a deck that has a lower curve than other decks, and tries to play, cheaper threats, maybe stops inking after a certain turn, that's fine for me. I don't like that there is an entire archetype in Lorcana that is literally just bored. I mean, your deck is a little bit different, Kawa, because you do have the bounce package, but especially in set 1, there was some, in my opinion, some pretty toxic aggro decks where they just played out threats and turned them sideways, and that was it. Nothing.
That's basically what at the end of the day, that's basically what my deck does as well. Like, the only thing is there's literally only 2 cards in the game that you will ever want to interact with your opponent's cards with, and that's the snake rarely, but honestly you still want to be turning that right most of the time, and then fox just to kill off one of their stuff, right? Because there's even times when I didn't even hit anything with their fox. I just used it for the bounce potential. But overall, that's what the deck is doing. But that version of, like you said, if they're lower to the ground, they're playing out kind of aggressive threats. Like, if that's not an aggro deck, then what is? It's just a slower aggro deck, right?
I want to emphasize that it's also this is a very personal, biased opinion. I think from a game design standpoint, they should exist, and they are relatively healthy. I think that the team behind Lorcana probably is very, very happy with the current state of aggro. There's an extremely accessible way to play the game, even at a competitive level. I kind of don't like that. I don't like playing against that. It feels like shit when I put, a lot of time into playing the game, or you're building decks, and then you just kind of get run over by something like that. But that's card games. So it's a reality I live with. So it's like if you want my personal biased opinion, which I wouldn't even implement if I was in charge. I would not implement if I was in charge. It's like, I just kind of wish those decks didn't exist, because they just kind of, they irritate me as a player.
I think in general, the existence of aggro decks is very important for a game, because the control, I don't know, there's so many different dynamics. It's no one would, I think a lot of people wouldn't enjoy playing control mirrors or just mid-range mirrors. I think having these different dynamics and matchups is very important. Plus, it means you don't have the danger of the deck with the most inevitable win con just always being the best deck, because at least you can try to be aggressive against it. I think all of these dynamics are very important, and aggro decks are important for basically any card game to exist. The problem that arises in Lorcana for me is, while in other games maybe we'd have the option of either I attack their hero, their leader, their whatever it's called, or I try to get more of a presence on the board. And those are important decisions. But if you think about Lorcana in the same way, attacking their leader is kind of questing. And there's no target when questing. And with these decks, questing is so often better than attacking into their character, because it means they have to actually attack into your character anyways. They can't really be questing, and you just waste them. And every time you can quest, or almost every time you can quest, you do quest. That just makes it feel like you're not actually. Sometimes it doesn't even feel like you're playing the game. You're just playing your curve and turning everything sideways. And that's the problematic part. But the problem is, I'm not really sure how in Lorcana we could have an aggro deck that doesn't act like this.
Yeah.
We would
need a 2-drop that says things can't quest, which would probably just be too broken overall. But you need something that has effectively taunt or something like that, like if in Hearthstone. So they can't progress their win condition, they have to deal with a threat first. But that card
is reckless, right? It's reckless in Lorcana.
Something like that, but a little bit.
No, it's like enforcing reckless on your opponent's cards.
Yeah,
you can. That is a thing, right?
Yeah,
it's just expensive,
right?
Those
cards are very cheap. Yeah, so when it's expensive, it basically just doesn't counter aggro. That's the problem. It's like there's a bit of a non-bow there, where it's like I need a card that does that, but I need to come down early, because if it's coming down late, it's not as
well. The answer is probably. I guess we can kind of get into it. I'm not going to say one of the cards that we're about to reveal is the answer to this problem, but like a card that was really problematic against me that wasn't just removal was a card like Pinocchio that exerts your cards, right? It's like when the problem is that, especially in the deck that I'm playing, that you're turning your card and then you're writing it up and you're just turning your card again with this like LeFou combo. As soon as you can force your opponent to exert their card and then you can use something to attack, then that really interrupts their game plan. So I do think like cards like Pinocchio are really good to stop aggro in its steps, besides just using these like key removal cards. But
game design wise, I think that's one perfect way to make aggro feel more interesting, because you don't. It's not like Dragonfire makes your aggro decisions more interesting. You're still always questing. But let's say there would be a lot of cards in the meta that can exert your cards but not kill them. That would mean, okay, if you have established a little bit of a board presence instead, or if that's the decision you want to be making, maybe the reward for that is if they can only exert it but not attack into your character, now you're playing around this type of removal. Another way, so I think that's one game design wise way to make aggro a bit more interesting. The other way would be, let's say a card that can quest for more if you have more characters, or let's say the less characters your opponent has on the board, like something that actually makes it a meaningful decision whether you want to be attacking your opponent's characters or questing for aggressive decks.
Yeah,
and there's a few ways to do it, but it's not very easy, I would say.
I think Shere Khan's going to be a really interesting card coming into set 3, especially if we're going to get into that more combat-based meta, because you could look at a Shere Khan deck and like I don't think I would call a Shere Khan deck aggro, because essentially they're doing very different things. Like you're not gaining 2 lore every time you attack and kill something with Shere Khan, right? You're only getting the 1, whereas a lot of these aggro cards you want to be questing for however much is on the card, whether that be 2, 3. But I think a version of aggro that we could see in set 3 that again isn't really aggro but might be a closer version to it, a little bit slower, would be maybe something like Shere Khan, where you focus on your decisions are more important, but still not as important, because then Shere Khan just gives you the lore. You're not literally deciding, do I have to attack or do I have to quest, you know?
To be fair, there are a lot of cards that exist actually. Like you mentioned, John Silver, I think Mother Gothel. There's also Aladdin, big Aladdin. Like that's a very anti-aggro effect. There is some tension when playing an aggro deck against a control deck. Like, do you overcommit to the turn 7? Be prepared. But I think in the current state of Lorcana, like you're already winning. Like you get to the turn 7, be prepared. I just feel like all the threats that make aggro potentially have to have an interactive game are too heavily costed right now, and so most of the time aggro decks are the dynamic they're dealing with is that anytime you would consider not just questing, it's most of that, it's pretty much
you
going to
should
be
just you should just quest. Yeah, I mean, I've done that in a tournament where I'm like, okay, do I really want to? And I'm like, what? I'm like, why am I even thinking about this? I just turn a card. That happens so much, honestly.
Yeah. And none of this is a discussion about aggro being too strong. It's just how aggro isn't very interesting right now. How could we make it more interesting? And I think it's just increasing the efficiency and the amount of cards that make your decisions whether to quest or not more interesting.
I think it's the type of deck that, like, Brendan summed it up perfectly. If you lose to an aggro deck, it sucks. I've been against aggro as an aggro player, and it still sucks just as much. Honestly.
It's subjective. You know, some people, when I first started playing card games, losing to control decks was like, it was just, it really sucked. And I could not fathom why someone would play a deck like that. Funny how we come full circle. But I was just like, this is so miserable. This is so one-sided. Like, this sucks. So I think it's very subjective. You know, losing an aggro deck feels bad. But for me, and like I said, I think for all of us, is like most of these opinions are very personal. Like if we were the game designers of Lorcana, we might not even completely implement them. But I do think that
we destroy the game realistically if we were the game designers.
Ruby Amethyst mirrors for all. But aggro right now, it's like I think Moyen actually expanded on it perfectly, where it is just only makes one meaningful decision consistently throughout the entire game, and there's almost no context changes, and that sucks. I mean, that's boring, to be honest. And I get the same sentiment that you do, where it feels like sometimes, most of the time, when you play against an aggro deck, it feels like your opponent wasn't even playing the game, which is fine. I think that should exist. Like I said, there's an accessibility standpoint there that you can, or an argument you can make, but yeah, it's weird how there's a dynamic. There's a gameplay between all the other archetypes and decks, and then with some of the other ones, there's just not right now. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, moving on to the next comment, we have it from Shatting. I'd assume they will go the promo route. You not only have Lorcana players, but mad Disney collectors to support the market, potentially leading to lucrative prizes that cost nothing to produce. Yeah, it's the same discussion we've been having for the past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
If they're going to go the pro, I just want to know the answer to this question at this stage. Honestly, I really just want to know.
I've come around a bit, to be honest. That's why I included these. Is like, I still think that if Ravensburger comes out and they put up 0 cash and just promos, like that's a weak move in a highly competitive TCG market where there is many options of games to play, and there's only going to be more in the near future. But I'll concede a bit that I maybe didn't appreciate how strong the Disney collector scene is and how profitable it could make some of these promos. So I'll walk it back a bit. I still don't like promo-based pricing. I still think that it's inherently Ponzi-nomic, that it's not actually a consistent way to provide value to players. But I do think that in Lorcana, at least for a while in the beginning, it would be very, very lucrative, and it would support competitive play.
Sure. All right. Next comment is from Alphos. Adding on to what Brendan said, I've never found buyers for like 3k worth of Digimon promos. As soon as One Piece was announced as Bandai's new focus, it crashed hard.
Yeah, that's how Bandai works, by the way. Just Bandai cycles their card games. It's not a fact, but it's an opinion that I hold strongly. So, yeah. By the way, Moyen, just want to let you know, I saw a promo that I sold for $10,000. This was an early fab promo. Someone posted on Twitter for $38,000 yesterday, so that made me feel pretty good. That made me feel good. It technically didn't sell, so it doesn't count yet. But yeah, and there was another promo that's the same promo actually, but the $30,000 one is a gold foil. The other one is just a extended art. I sold mine. I sold 3 of them, actually 4 of them, because I won 5 of them for $2,000. It is now going consistently for $6,000. So, sometimes I'm wrong. Unfortunately. Oh, I'm so poor.
Next comes from Per Platypus. Saying Lorcana is simple is like saying chess is simple. Yes, it's easy to grasp the rules, but winning versus an opponent is totally different. The books on chess theory and openings are immensely large when compared to the rule book of chess. Of course, I'm not directly comparing the games, but the point is saying it's simple due to the rules being easy to grasp, I feel, is
easy to refute.
It's just easy to refute. Yeah.
I think we talked about this in last podcast with like depth to complexity a lot, I think.
I think it's a great take and a great analogy, to be honest. Chess is a good example.
This comes from Empowered MGR. Also, shout out to for all the tips here. Second ever turning, and I ended up in the top 16 in the Merlin Strikes Back as red purple control. 6-2 day 1, 0-1 day 2, 5 on the draw, 3 on the play day 1, on the play day 2, and got outed by purple steel. Great games. Man, this actually just this is a very a side note right now, but during my 7 rounds with Swiss, like this is when you know you have it bad. I high rolled once as the aggro player out of 7 games. And I still got to where I got to. So I was pretty proud of that. They did enforce the rule, which was really good since I was literally number 1. Depending on how high or seeded you are, you just decide if you go first for the rest of the games in the top 16. It's not a high roll anymore. So that made me feel really good when everyone was shaking hands and IDing, and I was just like, as the aggro player, I know I'm going to be going first.
It matters.
After losing all of those high rolls.
Yeah. I do want to add a quick little story and anecdote. Flesh and Blood Pro Tour number 2 in Lille, France. Flesh and Blood's first aggro dominated metagame. Again, not a lot of decisions being made by the decks, way more than Lorcana, but not a lot of decisions being made by the decks. My critique of the format was that I felt like I was spectating my own games because it's just playing out the obvious lines. I played 14 rounds of Swiss. I lost 13 die rolls, and it was a very die roll format. Honestly, bro, I'm pissed. Because if I lost 14, I would have infinite more complaint equity than I do losing. You know, I won one. So when I won one of them, I was like, damn it.
It feels bad. It feels bad. But yeah, I talked to a lot of people there at the event of like how they can overcome this, which is something that we've talked about as well. Be interesting to see like if they ever did consider doing it, would it have to be before official OP stuff launches, or could they implement it further down the line? I think that's an interesting thing to
implement. What is it exactly?
Like changing the reason, or like implementing something that makes players not always want to go for it.
Oh, actually, I have a very nerdy, highly competitive way to do it that
Okay.
I would enjoy a lot, but I don't actually think maybe we shouldn't have it for the game. And
Tell
it's
us.
okay. Maybe you can have the coin flip, and then the player that wins it says, okay, he makes a bid where he's like, okay. So I would go second if you give me 5 lore. And then the other guy either gets to agree or he gets to say, okay, no, maybe you could.
That's a hypothetical
different
number, right? We're not just saying 5 lore.
No, he's bidding, so he's choosing.
Oh, he's bidding. Oh, he will say. Oh, wow.
So you get to choose the number, then you get to like auction with your opponent for how much lore does the starting player have.
I don't like it. No, I don't like it.
I personally would love it, but I don't think the game should have it.
Yeah.
No, Moyen, because if you're against like a highly competitive player, you'd probably spend the first 10 minutes of the round doing
No,
the
he's not
math
allowed
of
to.
like.
He's not allowed to. You call the judge if they take 10 minutes on the first bit.
Moyen just wants to scam his opponent. Moyen's been playing a lot of board games, you can tell. What is that board game you were telling me you really like that does that?
It was Terra Mystica that does it.
Terra
It
Mystica.
has different factions, and so there's different factions in the pool, and you choose with your starting victory point on what faction you actually do get to play. And it's like a highly, I don't know, you get to theorize so much about the actual values. And going first or second, I guess depending on the matchup, can also have different values. I think it's a very fun way to do it.
Yeah,
it's
but it's
interesting, but
very
there's no
inaccessible
way
way.
to do it. Yeah, there's no way.
You go to your local game store, some new player comes up, is like, he's now is in a bidding war for lore with Moyen. Oh, great.
Oh, you're like your Ember Sapphire? Okay, then I bid 4 lore points.
Yeah, your starter deck, I'll give you 19 lore if you let me go first. Oh man. Alright. Yeah, so this guy's basically just saying that he played really well. He ran into 3 discard, 2 steel song, 1 blue steel, and 1 red purple control. Day 1 was extremely painful. Every game was a nail biter. I could tell the moment I made mistakes that led to my 2 losses. I know we're not for them, but running 4 Maleficent Dragons brought me back from the brink in 2 separate discard games and 1 steel song where I was able to nuke the Tremaine. The one thing I want to talk about with the Maleficent Dragons, I do think it's better in very specific matchups, but the reason why we don't run it is because in most of our matchup spread, it's just not good. It would be good in like 1 or 2 matchups.
Actually, I do run 4 of them. Actually,
Okay,
I just pay 6 for it. And it's called Lady Tremaine.
Yeah, okay. No, but actually, he in the comment he's also pointing out how that Tremaine really wasn't that good because everyone's playing around it and a lot of decks are capable of playing around. And I agree on that. It's just I guess I would play low copies of Lady Tremaine and then no copies of Dragonsteel.
Yeah.
But I'm still happy that that the dragon worked out for you, man.
Yeah, that's great. Overall, very happy with the results as a new TCG player, and thanks for the podcast being so helpful in many ways. Thank you for listening to us and trying out the deck. That's awesome. Next one's from Darth Vader. Thanks for having such a great competitive Lorcana podcast. One question I have for you guys, which is, why does Simba Future King not see more play? I play a lot of Amethyst Steel, and it seems like such a great one-drop to bounce back with Malamim or Arthur. But it's great turn one play and can be decent later in the game. This is the one that I believe when you play it.
So it's a 1/2. You play it and you may draw a card and discard one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the main reason it's not seeing play is because people prefer to have 3 HP over the draw effect,
Yes.
which I think I can agree on. But I think the 1/2 is probably a bit underrated. I think it's an okay card. It's like a scaling 1-drop, and it doesn't get stronger once you play it. It's a bit worse than a 1/3 on 1 maybe, but at least it's a better card as the game goes on in comparison to just the 1/3. But yeah, I think in general it's just people they want to have a threat that doesn't just immediately die to grab your swords. That's probably the main reason.
This last comment is from the same player who did well with the red purple deck. I'm not a TCG business analyst, but I've always been curious why official clients haven't done a Netflix style subscription where you can pay monthly to sustain the company and digitally you have all the cards. Feel free to tear it up. I'd be curious why it would or wouldn't work. There's a little note here.
Yeah, it says,
Brendan,
no, don't read, because I was writing a note for myself. So I actually don't think it's a terrible idea. I'm sure there's reasons for it, but one thing I do want to say is I was doing some research on a card game called Artifact that came and went. I don't know if any of you guys played it. I'm assuming Moyen.
I'm aware of it.
Moyen probably dug his little TCG fiend fingers in it.
I haven't played it.
What?
I was only Hearthstone at the time.
Only Hearthstone. Okay, so it came and went. And a lot of people had issues with the monetization system. One thing about the game is, it had a lot of other issues as well in terms of how it launched and stuff. But the monetization of that game was actually cheaper than some other games. But part of it is that it was monetized very upfront. Like it was very clear how much you were paying for the cards and how much the decks cost because it was on the Steam marketplace. You had to buy them for cash. And now we're in the age of Marvel Snap, where your cards are $75 to $100 a piece and they come out weekly. And one thing I think that these companies have learned about monetization is that it's less about how much it actually costs and more, and there's a huge factor of actually just obfuscating it from your customer base and making it confusing. Because Marvel Snap is very confusing for how much cards cost. You have multiple different resources, they transfer into each other, you're not sure, the exchange rates are not clear, etc. And it's just funny that Artifact got so much flack for being overly expensive.
So transparent as well about it, though. Yeah.
I'll just say, I'm not saying that's why it died, but the transparency really, really, really didn't help. And I think that the monetization of modern digital card games is based in a lot of that. There's other reasons for why they do the multi-currency things. The main one being is it's very confusing to you as a customer and you spend more money than you should and money becomes not real money as soon as it's gold or credits or something. But also, I believe in some countries or regions, opening booster packs is illegal. It's like gambling. So if you make it not purchasable by money and it's by some sort of other currency that these players have acquired, even if they bought it with money, it gets around that law. But yeah, I do think that the monthly, getting back to the original point, and my whole point is monthly monetization would be very upfront. People would be paying a recurring cost. They would, they'd be feeling the cost of every month. I do think it's not a bad idea, because I do think that the current monetization of these card games is egregious and terrible, and they're completely unsustainable. And there's no way we can play multiple card games, let alone even one. So I don't hate it at all. If it's profitable, I would actually be 100% for it. I'm 100% for actually paying for things that you use. I think it's totally fair. It's much more fair than paying $175 for a card.
Personally, I would love that system. I don't know if I would love it, but I think I would like that system. More than any systems we see in card games. It's just so honest in telling you, okay, you're paying this much money you're getting exactly this out of it. And maybe it's just, okay, you pay monthly just to have you to play the game, but you have all the cards. And it's, I in a lot of these models, I think you would spend less money than you would in any of these card games where we just like, oh, I don't know, there's a bundle, I buy that, and I can pre-order the next expansion, 50 packs, I buy that. And then I think we could end up spending less in total for the game, but a lot of people would still feel like they're spending more.
Yeah.
Because they know they have to pay to play or something like that. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think right now the card game monetizations are developing in a direction where it's like, they want to make you feel good about what you're spending,
yes.
or even worse, they want to make you
feel powerful.
Spend that money, but not be totally aware of it.
Yeah.
Like, of course, you like technically you know, but you don't really know how much you. I don't know how much I've spent on Hearthstone in a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
I don't
know.
I have like a super cynical take about why some of these card games are getting away with what they're getting away with in terms of monetization. And I think that regardless of what people will yell and scream about on Reddit or Twitter, I think that it's possible that the data actually backs up that people like paying for power. And that pay to win is actually a motivating aspect to spend more money. And people, it's not enough of a negative aspect to the game that will actually push people away. And basically these systems, the biggest example I have of this is Marvel Snap, is that we always talk about the monetization system like there's something wrong with it and that they need to fix it to get it in a better state. But my current theory now is that the system is actually optimal and they're actually just further optimizing it to extract more money out of us. It's like we as the community are like, oh, this is obviously a mistake. They'll fix it. Like this is clearly not how it's supposed to be. And I'm wondering if like the pay to win, pay to play, pay for power aspect is like the data just backs it up. Like human beings and their lizard brains just like love that shit. So yeah, I love the word used for this system. It might just be too honest. It might be too honest, and I think it would make it might make less money. I would love it though, personally.
Mm-hmm. But actually, I say I would like it, but maybe even I would like subconsciously
yeah.
don't like still feel bad about it, even if I would spend less money, just because it's.
I can't.
The monthly thing that the monthly thing that card games are doing at the moment, anyways, just like all of these, like a battle pass, right? This is their like it's not a subscription, but you still know that every month I'm spending $10 or $20 to get. It will always work out to be better value in terms of the currency and the in-game stuff that you're getting. But how they do this basically is you spend 10 or 20, you're spending it every month, but it's not like a subscription. It's not like it's not like in your head that this is kind of a recurring thing. It's recurring, but whenever the new battle pass comes out, you just buy it, right? It's a completely different model, and also what you're paying for in comparison to if there was like an actual subscription model is like what you're actually paying for. To us makes it seem great because in a game like Marvel Snap where the cards are like $75 to $100, like I'm paying $10 for a card. It's so good. Yeah, it's good value. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. That's actually the worst about these battle passes. It's like, okay, so let's say we could have an honest model where you get all the cards from one expansion or card set for €50, or that you could buy these cards for 200, but for this bundle value you can get it for 100 instead, and then
that's how they get you.
Maybe you would actually feel better about spending that 100 instead of that upfront 50.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's so funny how Kawa, that was a great point. It already exists, but these companies, they aren't like, hey, what if we had a monthly subscription? Like, what about both? That's what they're doing. It's funny you say that, Moyen, because when I was watching this documentary on Artifact, they had this content creator that was talking about the price of Artifact, and they were a deeply entrenched content creator. They're like, oh, I remember telling people it wasn't that expensive because people in Magic the Gathering were paying upwards of $300 for $400 for a single deck, and in Artifact it was $300, or $500 for all the cards. And it's just funny that the human brain can make that connection, like it's logical and it makes sense, but it doesn't, because Magic cards are actually physical assets that retain value that you own. where this is just a digital image in a card game that's arbitrarily gated behind you not having it, and you just need the game pieces to play. But like we're like, oh, this is a parallel. This makes sense. It should be $300. That makes sense. But it's like, no, it doesn't make any sense. It's just arbitrarily expensive. And then like in Snap, like you talked about, things are, let's say the default price is relatively $100. If they give something for $50, everybody's like, "Oh my god, that's great value."
Yeah,
I know. Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's
See,
all
all these things on Twitter saying like, "Finally, we've got like the great gold bundle value." It's like as soon as you get like that little bit of value, everyone starts going crazy because they think they've been gifted. We're so used to this insane system that we think any bit of a discount is just insane.
Stockholm syndrome.
Isn't there like some account that does these spreadsheets on like on value of the bundle, and then like, oh, actually this value is 1.2 value, and and they're like, got a 1.3 value bundle, let's buy it.
Yeah, let's buy it. Yeah, let's give them, because because we think we're saving this much money. Yeah, it's just crazy, man.
And you're still buying absolutely nothing. Like you literally still buy basically nothing. You buy a virtual item that's been artificially gate kept away from you. It's like, it's not a real asset. It's insanity. It is actually pure insanity. And then the other, man, I think I lost my train of thought. I was about to say something funny about, the other thing in Marvel Snap, the community, and I'm sorry that we've detracted a bit, but it's relevant for Lorcana and online digital client, etc. But the Marvel Snap community has shown time and time again that they will complain, boycott, in spirit, all these different things. But then in the same post where they talk all this trash about the current bundle or the price, they literally have the sold icon on their bundle. Like
this unique variant that you only have if you bought the bundle. They're complaining about the bundle, and that's still the bundle's still in their collection. They have the card.
Yeah.
All right. Spoilers.
All right. Yes, the big section that I hope any of our new listeners are here for, any of our loyal listeners, thank you for sticking with us for so long. We've got 2 cards to spoil. The first one we're going to discuss is an Amethyst action card. It's a 3-cost uninkable. Last ditch effort. It reads, exert chosen opposing character, then chosen character of yours gains challenger +2 this turn. It's also an uncommon card. Brendan, Moyen, I'm going to give it over to you guys. What do you think about the card? Very comparable to Freeze, which is the 2-cost uninkable action that just exerts the chosen opposing character, and also the Pinocchio card, which is the same cost but has a 1/1 body attached to it.
It is very comparable to Freeze. I don't know about Pinocchio because Pinocchio leaves behind a body. I did think this card was originally a song, so I'm dealing with that revelation right now. That's actually an action. So this card is, I'll be honest with you guys, it's not very good, but it does have niche implication, right? Like if there is going to be a particularly nasty threat that comes out in set 3 or exists in the current card pool that doesn't need to quest in order to have this effect. Let's say it has a very nasty static effect like Prince John, but let's say it doesn't have ward. This card could be powerful for very myopic metagames that are focused around that card specifically. Challenger 2 is not going to be it's going to be a lot better in set 3 because Challenger, I believe, does affect location. So it's going to help you clear out location. So you don't even have to kill the character that's been exerted with this card. You can exert something for whatever reason that might be relevant, and then you can kill a location with the Challenger +2. Both of those effects for 3 costs on Inkable. Right now, it currently would make any Amethyst decks that I'm aware of, but in the context of locations coming out and new cards that could be, particularly troublesome with static effects, it exists as a tool that you have access to in set 3.
Also, I like that in this podcast we've talked about how we need more tools where we can like exert opposing characters, and then you actually need a character on your board to trade into to make aggro more interesting. And this is one of those tools. And Kawa talked about niche implications before the pod, where the one card we could probably see this being pretty good against is Minnie Mouse, where you get to kill your opponent's Minnie Mouse before it even did anything. Right now, often in the mirror, we wait until they quest with Minnie, and then we Pascal our evasive to do the trade. We play Peter Pan Shadow to Peter Pan Shadow to trade into it. But this is another way to maybe get rid of the character before it even quested, and then even kill it with our own Pascal or our own Minnie Mouse. So there's definitely some implications for the card.
For sure. The next card that we have to reveal is an Amber card, 2-cost inkable item, Wildcat's Wrench. When you exert this card, remove up to 2 damage from chosen location. So this is an interesting card to discuss, but it also depends on all of the location cards. We, as a podcast, haven't dived too deep into all of the spoilers yet. But if there is some really important locations that you want to keep safe, you could see this card, used there. Overall, I don't think it's like anything crazy off the bat, but if you're against a type of deck that doesn't have high attack cards like Moyen and stuff like that, and they just kind of have smaller dudes that just do a bit of chip damage to your location, this is definitely a nice tool that can be used to heal up your location. Any thoughts, guys, on the card?
Yeah, so I like that it's inkable, it's an item, maybe this has item synergy. Yeah. Plus, the activation on it is
free.
Doesn't cost any resources, so it can provide incremental value under the right circumstances. The only issue I guess I would see with the card is the circumstances aren't that easy to meet, because with characters you can attack yourself or challenge yourself and then heal your character back up again. With locations, that is not the case, right? They can't challenge.
Not that I know. It would be cool if we have a location that would be like
living location that can.
If attack. Or like one that like if you like tapped or like you could do something with location. Oh, right. It takes damage and then you get an advantage, and then like I don't know if that exists. If a location like that does exist in set 3, I think this card could be very good.
Yeah.
But besides that, yeah, I do agree that usually being able to heal your cards is better when you can choose to attack with them and then heal up the damage rather than them just getting attacked into. So yeah, I think putting into that perspective, if we get some locations like that, I think this card could definitely see some play. Brennan?
Also, just want to point out that like I guess I don't know how often your opponent will attack into a location without actually finishing it off. So it would need to be a very high HP, high priority target, the location, so that you would actually be able, that your opponent would be incentivized to attack into it, but still not be able to finish it off, and then you get to heal it back up with the Wildcat's Wrench.
Yeah.
Brandon?
I feel like I'm kind of a PR nightmare for this podcast. So this card is bad, but
no.
But I mean, item synergy is nothing to sneeze at. Like we see terrible items or relatively bad items played in one of the most powerful decks that exists in the game, which is Ruby Sapphire. Like item synergy can be very, very, very good, and we haven't seen all of set 3 yet. So just because it's a 2-cost item, it could fit in some of those decks. I think that nowadays in the current power level of item synergy, you kind of want it to be 1 cost, and you also want it to draw another card. But yeah, I do think that the limitations on removing what you remove 2 damage from. So if they said remove 2 damage from chosen permanent, it would still be iffy. I think it would be a lot better. If it could be characters or locations, but because it is just locations, your opponent has a lot of agency whether to deal damage to those locations. I do think that this would only be relevant if there was a particularly overpowered location.
There would have to be a lot of location healing synergies, which again we'll be taking a look at the leaked location spoiled location cards over the next few episodes, but I haven't seen any to my mind at the moment. But it could be one of those things that a card could be revealed later that this could synergize well with. And
like the card says in the flavor text, the right tool makes all the difference. This is absolutely not that tool, but I'm sure we'll find it in our location deck.
Or let's say I have it. You know how we have Beast, the card that Beast Tragic Hero, draw a card when it's undamaged. Maybe we have a location that does something only when it's full HP, so your opponent is incentivized to just poke it instead of killing it off. And then the Wildcat's Wrench would be great.
That'd be cool, yeah. Moyen predicting the next card that's going to be revealed tomorrow, guys. Yeah. When you're watching this podcast, that location will have come out. All right. So moving on to this next card isn't part of our spoiler section, but it's a card that I know Brendan really wants to bring up because we saw some people talk about it on Twitter, and we discussed it a lot before the podcast. Yeah. So Brendan, read out the card for us.
Okay, the boss is on a roll. Action, Song, and Amethyst. 3 costs can be inked. It says, look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Put any number of them on the top or bottom of your deck in any order. Gain 1 lore. I mean, this is basically GOAT. Okay, it's not good.
Oh,
Yeah, so I think we were talking about the level at which this is unplayable. Like, I think that this card got a lot of traction on Twitter, and I just kind of want to talk about why it is not as good as people think. It is not useless per se. Like, so three cost song, gain one more. Is that good enough? No, not at all. It's not good enough. 3 costs, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, put them back on top or bottom in any order. Is that good enough on its own for 3 costs? No. And what would you draw a sort of similarity to? Or at least a card you have to evaluate against? It's probably something like Friends on the Other Side. That's what your current 3 cost song slot is currently being occupied, which this does not compare to. But I just want to point out, this card is, in my opinion, it's absolutely terrible on its own. But we have new cards.
APG, don't be a PR nightmare for the podcast.
we have new cards in set 3, like the Sorcerer's Hat, in which scenario this would be a pretty good card. With that, effectively, if you had not landed the Sorceress, I'll read out the Sorcerer's Hat real quick. The Sorcerer's Hat item in Amethyst, 2 costs, can be inked. Incredible Energy is the ability. Tap and pay 1. Name a card, then reveal the top of your deck. If it's the name card, put that card in your hand. Otherwise, put it on top of the deck. So you will know the top of the deck. You will know multiple cards in the top of the deck at this, because even if you draw a card, you can sequence the 3rd card to be something you know. So this is a very powerful interaction with Sorcerer's Hat. I think you need to evaluate based off the initial interaction, which is 2 card, pay 6 to draw a card. Like that's what I'd be evaluating.
And gain a lore.
And
choose the order of some cards.
Yeah, I value choosing the order a lot lower, I think, than some people, but it's not irrelevant. But yeah.
Let's just to I don't think the card's great either, but I think it's better than you think it is. So to play devil's advocate for a little bit, let's say you're playing. So let's say it would only be 3 cost song, inkable, gain a lore. It's like I think it's already not that far away from being playable, because let's say it's a card you can always use for ink, and then you have a little bit of reach, a little bit of burn left to top deck in the deck in a few games that can help out. But let's go back to the interaction with Merlin's Hat.
First question before. Would you play this card without an additional card like Hat for synergy? Like, is this card good enough on its own?
Probably not, but it's not terrible. I've seen a lot worse cards. I think it's okay. Okay,
go ahead.
To talk about the hat, I think the synergy is like, if you don't just value it on the initial cast, I think over the course of a few turns, the interaction is crazy. Let's say you already got the book, the Merlin's Hat down, and then on one turn you have 3 cost, gain a lore, and then pay another one, draw a card that you choose. Right, you get to choose the order. I think one way you could choose to use this card is where you most of the time you just let's say you have Merlin's Hat on board, you just let all 5 cards stay on top. You just choose the order, and then you get to pick which card you draw with the hat now. Then you have a natural draw. You still know what's the top card. You get to do Merlin's Hat again. Next turn you draw another card. You get to do it again. You get 3 1-cost draw cards of just setting up the bosses on a roll once. So I think on their own they're not good cards, but I think together they're like very potent.
Yeah, you naturally draw. Okay, so say you stack 5 on top, you naturally draw card 2 and card 4, but then you Sorcerer's Hat draw card 1, 3, and 5.
Yeah.
And the entire cost of drawing all of those cards is
3, right? Well,
6,
5.
It's like
7, 8. It's 8.
It's 8. You gain a lore. You draw 3 cards.
Yep. And you will definitely lose temp. So both of these cards should be considered tempo losses, I think, because you're So 8 costs,
even if you're singing, but like singing it helps a little bit to mitigate the tempo cost.
True.
So it's not just 8 lore, and it's also over the course of a lot of turns. So it's like paying 8 lore all at once, 8 ink all at once would be very bad, but maybe it's a lot easier to fit in this ink a little bit each time.
So 8 cost, draw 3, because you would have to stack 5 on top, so it'd be the original order anyway.
Yeah.
Or, and that's 2 card, by the way, so you pay 2 cards for that as well. 8 cost, draw 3, pay 2 cards, or you can play double Friends on the Other Side, 2 card, 6, draw 4.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay, but
And
it's not just this is not just about baseline. This is you also gain a lore, and let's say you're on a spot. Let's say you have 6 ink, and you're playing this, and you can only win if you draw Be Prepared next turn.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a context hater. I know I'm like the extreme value gamer. Like no
Context exists. It's real.
I think the biggest point I want to take away from this is that people are evaluating the card way higher than what it actually is because they were trying to compare it to a card like Goat. I don't think that's where the value of this card comes from. I'm starting to agree with Moyen more that the value of this card is actually being able to fish for the cards that you want rather than the aggressiveness of getting the lore. It's kind of a bonus, and like maybe if you're in an aggressive deck, you're trying to get that last little finisher piece. But I don't know. You gotta
discard the card though, right? Because you discard this card and you're already tight on cards as the aggro deck. I think that this card,
this is not an aggro card.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
No, that's what we're saying is why people. This is I'm saying the reason why some people are thinking or trying to think why it's good is because they probably think it is an aggro card. You know,
I think they're overvaluing the information actually, which is just classic. My value of information is lower than the community.
I don't know. So yes, they are overvaluing the information, but also I feel like as soon as information comes into play, you're really like, oh, okay, no, it's terrible. But there's still, I mean, it's just very little value in it, but the value exists. It's non-zero.
It's definitely non-zero. I'm on the extreme.
Yeah.
But
first deck breakdown, we're gonna have a new set. It's gonna be Moyen using this card against.
All right, hold on.
Yeah. No, I don't even like this card. I just like it. I just don't hate it as much as Brandon. Also, with the current synergy we have, it's maybe still not that great, but maybe this is a theme of Amethyst in the set, and maybe there will be more cards like Merlin said, where knowing the top card of your deck helps you.
Okay.
So I think that this card's not that far away from being playable.
To summarize, so I don't get roasted, I think this card sucks. If you think this card is good on its own, you can roast me. But I do think that the interaction with Sorceress had is powerful. I think it's a powerful interaction. I think it's a good interaction. I would not say that interaction sucks. Even though we did all the kind of like math on the exchange rate floor, we were talking about the floor. So worst case scenario, you're not seeing it. I think that is a fine and good interaction. But ultimately, like all these information cards, I think they're usually underrate, like severely underrate. Like something like we were talking about Nothing to Hide. Nothing to Hide is mostly played because it's a cantrip and it draws an additional card. The information of what your opponent has is non-zero. I agree with you, but I do think that some people value that as the primary thing you're getting from the card is looking at your opponent's hand, and I evaluate the primary thing we get from the card is drawing a card. So.
Okay, so that concludes our nice discussion on the boss is on a roll. So we might be going a little bit over time, but it's up to you, Brennan. Do you want to dive into one or two spoiler cards, or do you want to save them for next week?
Just pick your favorite one. We'll do one.
Pick my favorite one.
Kawa's favorite spoiler so far.
Oh god, you're putting me on the spot here. Well, there is one card I want to discuss, and I mean, myself and Brennan, and probably Moyen, have known about it for a while because it was one of the leaked cards. But I do think it's a card that is worth talking about. And I'm actually going to talk about one other one after this just because I think it's hilarious. So the card I'm going to talk about is Morph. Morph is a 2-cost inkable card. He's a 2/1 with an emerald, and he reads, you may play any character with shift on this character as if this character had any name. What do you guys think about this card?
Oh, I think it sucks.
You think it sucks? Okay.
It has 1 HP, and the shifting mechanic has been, I don't know, there's some shift cards that are very strong, but like the shifting mechanic itself, I don't think has been great so far. Brendan? I think most of the time I'd rather play the card that shifts onto.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of flexibility, like in terms of the inconsistency with shifting. If you have to shift something in particular, like you do for the Amber Steel deck, you have to shift something very particular in order to sing. Mm-hmm. Still, you wouldn't play this though because it costs 2, and the thing you're shifting on costs 1, and that's really important. But it's hard for me to evaluate this card because whatever card it would be busted with does not currently exist in the metagame.
Yeah. Okay. To be fair, let's say there was a extremely expensive card that has like shift 3, but the only thing you could usually shift it onto was a 5-drop. Okay, of course it would morph with suddenly a good card.
Yeah. You can cheat resources. Like that's the thing.
I think
the fundamentals you can cheat.
Yeah, the other biggest thing is like Moyen, like you said, it's that 1 health. Like if this card ever became like a really meta-defining card in everyone's deck, that in terms of, you don't play the normal named cards, you just only play Morph, then everyone will just be running cards like we're already seeing, like Teeth and Ambitions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Unless there was some like busted thing at the very start, like, on turn 1, you give something like resist +2 or something like that, right? That you actually couldn't kill it. To
be fair, if that happened, that would mean the card is very good.
Yes, that's what I mean. It would be very good then. Yeah.
So like, although it has like dies to removal downside, if it was ever a scenario where it was warping the metagame to a place where people were playing cards that killed it for a cheap rate, it means it is a fundament, like a good card at the base. Whatever card this is broken with, it doesn't come to mind. It doesn't exist currently in the metagame, or it's not being played very frequently. I don't see it because a lot of these shift characters just haven't been played too much. But if you are cheating resources at any time, that is a powerful thing you can do in a card game. So if the thing you have to shift it on to usually costs 5 and then you can pay 2, then you cheat 3 resources. That's strong.
All right, the final card I want to talk about before we wrap up the podcast is one that was actually revealed either today or yesterday, and I want to talk about it because I think this is going to be the Gantu of set 3, unfortunately. So it's a legendary card within Steel, 4 cost, uninkable, Mickey Mouse Trumpeteer, 0/1, exert, you have to pay 2, play a character for free.
I don't understand.
You don't understand? Okay, so if you play this on turn 4 and on turn 5, if you tap it, you can play that big Goofy that everyone's definitely playing.
If I lose one more game to Goofy, I'm quitting Lorcana.
Was it a tournament game that you lost?
Yeah, I mean, I topped that tournament still, but in the best of 3, I lost one game because they dropped to Goofy and I just didn't have anything. So very frustrating.
Yeah,
so,
I don't know.
So it's 4 cost 0/1?
Yeah, 4 cost 0/1. You tap it and pay 2, and then you play a character for free.
So it's actually not a bad card. Because, like, again, if you cheat resources at any time, like, it's just a fundamentally powerful thing to do.
Sure.
Is it going to be a consistent card? Like, are the payoffs going to be big enough that you're looking for a 2-card combo and playing something that's a 0/1 or to cheat 3 resources? Like, maybe not, but I do think it is a powerful card, even if it won't see immediate like play in the metagame. Like, it's a powerful effect because like it does.
Oh no, it's a powerful effect. Yeah, I have to agree with that. I just think it's so funny that if people think that this card is gonna stick, like okay, if you're facing something that isn't naturally running any type of removal, then suddenly this card is like really really good, right? Because if you just cheat out something massive for free even once, it's really good because you're cheating resources, but like, I don't know. I just anyone that's immediately high on the card, I think is a bit.
Yeah. Actually, I doubt this will see like this will be in any of the best decks that we will have. No. Even not knowing any of the cards, because it's just so the investment is pretty big in a 4-cost card.
Yeah,
and it dies to anything. It doesn't mean people don't have to suddenly play cards to just so they can kill this. If they have anything that deals damage, they will trade up into this card. And even when you get this off, I don't feel like it's the most crazy way to cheat resources if on turn 5 you're still paying 2 resources and just to get 1 expensive card on the board. Like, do we have better ways to cheat like 7 cost Cinderella on the board, and still it's not something that people try to do a lot in the
I mean, what we want to be even cheating out like if
all the ultra expensive cards in Lorcana don't immediately win the game, which is funny.
Yeah, like
actually not. They're usually just bigger stats. They're not like that much better. You know, like they're not. Yeah,
they should have like really. I mean, the best one I think you could pair this with is probably Maleficent Dragon, because that's the only high cost card that actually has a very good effect in my opinion. Besides that, the rest of them, like you said, are just like big stats that are just gonna get removed. The card's just gonna get removed, right? So
it needs to be something. So it needs to be something that either is not easy to remove, or at least it already did something very powerful on play.
If there was something really big, with Ward, would you guys think this is good.
For me, I would think it would need to be so, because the investment's still huge and it's still very easy to die. I think it would need to be something with ward, high stats, high lore per turn, and also have an aura effect, so your opponent can't just play a lot of shitters and quests.
Yeah, it has the
If it
Tiana.
has
It
all
has the
that, then
Tiana effect.
maybe it's okay.
Yeah, the Tiana
The
text, it
Tiana
just has
effect,
everything.
They can't cast songs, or they can't play actions. You draw
so-
10 cards.
What you're telling me is we're basically going to get something like Infinite and Marvel Snap, where it costs 20, and the only way you can actually play the card is with Mickey Mouse Trumpeteer.
Yeah, I do think that Moyen's most correct here. It's just like, I think this card has been purposely overcosted, and inevitably it's just going to be very clunky and bad for the payoff. Even if you do Maleficent's Dragon, I don't think it's worth jumping through the hoops of having this, because this, okay, so if you cheat on Maleficent Dragon, the 2 cards themselves are powerful. But if you evaluate both those cards individually, the Mickey Mouse is still trash. So in order to play 6-cost Maleficent, I have to play a trash card in my deck. 6-cost Maleficent, that is. I don't think that that's good enough, to be honest. Like, I really don't. And that's not even considering how vulnerable this card is. It's extremely vulnerable.
Okay, maybe we have like a 9 or 10 cost character, but when it comes down, it deals 3 damage to all opposing characters, or 4 damage. Like, so a board wipe on a character.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be
Now
what we
we're
need
talking.
to make it good.
Yeah.
Because now you have 6 cost to be prepared. Yeah.
That also leaves up a character.
How
And then
much
it's
would
huge
this?
tempo.
How much would this card, like, if this card costed 5? Okay, already I'm just making the card so much worse by giving it 1 extra cost. But if this card costed 5 and it had ward, like what? Okay, if this card had ward, how much do you think you'd have to pay for the free card? Like, pay 4, pay 5 even? Because if this card has ward, it makes it obviously a lot better, but then you'd have to increase some more things. I think if this card just had ward now, you slap ward on this without changing anything else, the card is a lot better, right?
Yeah.
A lot better.
You slap a ward on any card, it's a lot better.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah, but on this card specifically, suddenly they would need AoE, or maybe you're getting a good trade out of it.
So what about if there's cards in the game that actually give, like, is it? Am I getting into, as Brendan was saying, Magical
That's
Christmas
bippity
Land?
boppity boo.
Yeah, I'm getting into Magical Christmas Land when I'm giving Mickey Mouse ward to then pull out something absolutely huge. Yeah, Brendan's there shaking his head. He's not having any of it.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I don't know. It just, I don't think it's it, actually. Even, that's funny, because I think the fundamentals of the card are actually not bad, where you cheat resources, but the fact that the card itself is so vulnerable, is so bad alone, and it does require the 2-card combo to do anything. It's just like, yeah, I'd rather not. I don't think. We would need to see a card that is much more powerful than Maleficent, 9-drop Maleficent, in order for this card to be good. Come out in set 3.
Also, in general, I want to say maybe this podcast is sometimes perceived as like talking shit about all the cards other people get excited about, but we also get excited about cards. It's just maybe I feel like we're a little bit more honest.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
People don't always like that, but I think it's good that we're trying to be as honest.
It's because it's what Brendan said though. I think we have to look at this like the floor, and I think maybe, I don't know, 70%, 80% of people who want to get excited with these cards want to look at the ceiling and say this absolute crazy thing if it happens. But as competitive players, we got to be realistic about how things will usually go in a game.
Yeah.
Like, if this pops off once, yes, it will be good. How often is it going to pop off? Very rarely. But at the same time, I do want to say we like to be proven wrong. Like, if things change and something comes out, like, yeah, we'll have a laugh about it. We'll look back at this clip or whatever, be like, oh, we misjudged this card. But with the current context that we have now, everything we're saying makes sense, at least in our opinions. Of course, if not, we wouldn't be saying it, right? So, yeah, like, I do agree. Most people would probably think that we just
dunk on all the cards. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's because I think that it's standard. It's somewhat standard in the content sphere to just be overly excited and optimistic about cards. But card games are relatively objective. You reach an objective result. You either win or lose. And everybody wants to win. Trying to get you closer to the objective result there.
And in any card game, it's always a minority of cards that actually see competitive play. That's just how it goes.
Yeah. I just want to, for anybody who hasn't been listening to Podcana since set 2, or set 1, late set 1, oh, we got thrashed in the comments for all of our evaluations.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for it to happen again.
Because we were not high on Zero to Hero, Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo,
Dinner Bell.
and
Dinner Bell,
and I think at least in set 1 we've ended up being right on a lot of those cuts. But I'm looking forward to next spoiler season and see if we can repeat it, or maybe this time we have a few terrible takes.
I mean, to be honest, it's probably good either way. If we have some terrible takes and they end up being terrible, it's just content, and then
we also just
if
learn.
We're right.
We just get better.
Course.
If we're wrong about anything, please feel free to DM it to me before a large tournament. Give me the secret sauce, and I'll take it to the tournament victory, and I'll happily tell you I was wrong.
Yeah,
I don't have any investment in being right or wrong about card evaluations, but a lot of these cards do suck. But that's how it works. Like, I mean, it's just. But like Moyen said, most of the cards are going to be unplayable. Anyway, if you're listening to this podcast and you like it and you particularly love the card reviews, then you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We read every single review, and it's the number one thing you can do to help out this podcast. So wherever you're listening, leave us a review there. We're interested to hear your feedback. There's a video version of this on YouTube at youtube.com/@Podcana podcast. You'll see card images there to help you out. And hit that subscribe while you're there. Our Twitters are BrendanAPG, Moyen_HS, and KawaTech_CG. Be sure to check out Kawa's YouTube channel for the deck tech on that Ruby Amethyst aggro deck. You can get a lot more details and how to play the deck and take it to your own first seed Swiss at a tournament. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.